Hey everyone, and welcome to Voices of Veritas, a podcast made by the church for the church. I'm Ryan Hennigan.
And I'm Michael Bashaw. At Veritas Community Church, we believe that the gospel of Jesus Christ is at work in and through us, transforming all things.
On Voices of Veritas, you will hear real stories of gospel transformation, spiritual insights, and heartfelt conversations that seek to encourage us as we follow Jesus.
We invite you to join us twice a month to listen, learn, and grow in faith together.
Well, welcome to the Voices of Veritas podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Ryan Hennigan, and I'm glad to say I am joined with my co-host, Michael Bashaw. Michael, how are you this evening?
I'm doing fantastic, Ryan.
Good.
Yes. How are you?
I'm doing well. I highlight the word evening because I think this is the latest we've ever recorded an episode before.
Yes. Yeah, it's like 7 o'clock on a Wednesday. So
yeah, feels like what would be like the equivalent of SNL, but for Veritas, you know.
Yes.
No skits.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, as I've mentioned on the last several episodes, some of our more dedicated listeners might be aware by now that one of the things we try to do on this podcast is not only highlight the church specifically, but also different ministries. We're going to be speaking with some folks from DMI. And to do that, we have Aaron Crecelius, we have Nikki Tillman, and James Tillman. Guys, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Sweet. So before I have you introduce yourselves, we actually asked this question before we started recording, but what does DMI stand for?
So DMI stands for Disciple Making Intensive. There's a book. The heart of the book is about evangelism. And so this guy, Bob McNabb, he did overseas ministry in Thailand for, I don't know, exactly 10, 20 years or so overseas, and, just doing street evangelism in Thailand, and then felt like God was calling him back to the States to call more Americans out to the mission field, specifically overseas. The book talks a lot about the disproportionate amount of Christians, the concentration of Christians in America compared to the rest of the world. So his ministry looks like calling Americans to overseas ministry. Mm-hmm. But the book is very applicable to anyone looking to grow in evangelism. Nikki pulled it up. Spiritual Multiplication in the Real World by Bob McNabb.
Well, why don't you guys go ahead and tell us just a little bit about yourselves. James, maybe we can start with you.
I'm James Tillman. I'm actually originally from South Carolina, so I'm a little bit of a transplant. I don't sound like I'm from South Carolina all the time, but trust me, I cook like it. So, so if you want some good Southern comfort food, I'm your guy.
Okay, wait, we have to pause. I'm sorry. What's your favorite Southern comfort dish?
Ooh, I'd probably have to say shrimp and grits.
Okay.
South Carolina is known for shrimp and grits. I usually do a little bit of a Cajun spin on it, but I love just a nice hearty bowl of just some like real solid cheesy grits with some Cajun shrimp and some smoked sausage in there, or some andouille sausage. It just hits the spot.
Anyway, sorry. So you're from South Carolina. You're a transplant.
Yeah.
Continue.
Work brought me up here. I work in the construction industry as a project manager, specifically representing an owner who's building data centers around Columbus.
Very cool.
Oh, yeah. Great question. I have been coming to Veritas now for a little over 6 years. I moved to Columbus probably 3 or 4 months before the pandemic happened. So
great time to move.
Right.
To, explore a new city. Right before the pandemic.
Make new friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's good to have you. Thanks for joining us. Nikki, how about you?
I'm from Pickerington, so kind of a local. But I've been coming here for like 15 and a half years now.
Whoa.
Yeah, I've been coming here since after I graduated from high school. My Young Life leaders, I was involved in Young Life, were involved here in Veritas, and I was like, well, they're cool, and I really value like how they walk their faith, and so I it's like, well, I'll go where they're going. So yeah, but then it stuck. So yeah. I really enjoy just like sitting down with people and like talking to them and like talking through like life's hard challenges. I did make a job out of it, and I do love it.
Do a
I do
professional.
feel like the Lord has really called me to that. So yeah.
Now, Nikki, you actually have a little bit of a different twist because you weren't always going to the Short North campus.
Yeah, I went to Veritas East. If you guys know, you know.
Yes.
Yes.
When did Veritas East close down?
I'm blanking on the year. It didn't last long. It was like a 3-year stint.
Okay.
But it was a really great time. It was like a small community. Yeah, it was a great time. Like sad it had to end, but
well, at least we got you here at Short North.
I know. Glad to be here.
How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm from Mason, Ohio. I went to Ohio State and then moved to Chicago for 2 years, and then moving back, had a friend of my church in Chicago that recommended Veritas. Yeah.
What was in Chicago?
I had a job right out of college,
Okay.
so worked in public accounting out
Nice.
there, and then transferred offices when I got married last year.
Cool.
Yeah. So I transitioned out last year,
Oh, good.
so last May. So now I work for a private equity real estate group.
Well, we would love to, we're glad all of you are here today. We would just love to talk a little bit about DMI, introduce us to it and the listeners as well. I am thinking about the disciple making part of it, which seems like it's at its core. And I would love to know just how all of you got involved in the first place with DMI. And then we'll just dive into what it is and talk about that.
I'll kick it off. So my church in Chicago, Park Community Church, when I was going to church there, they had a DMI session. I love doing evangelism, and so when I heard about DMI at my church at Park Community Church, I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. I should do it. And so I reached out to the leader, and because I was dating Lily a long distance at the time, we were traveling back and forth a lot. And one of the things about DMI is that it prioritizes community. It's a huge part of it that we go out and we do evangelism together. We're a tight-knit community who cares for one another, encourages one another. And so they basically were like, hey, if you can't commit to 8 out of 10 weeks, maybe wait till next session. And I was like looking at my calendar and I was like, oh, I could make 6. And they were like, let's find a different time, a different session for you to join. And I was like, all right, fair enough. Like, you got to stick to your rules. So I never ended up doing DMI at my church in Chicago. And so then when I moved to Columbus, just still had this huge heart for evangelism and wanting to go and share the gospel with the lost. And so I was just praying. Lily and I were both praying, like, where is God calling us to serve at Veritas, to serve, in general. So I texted Pastor Chris. I'm not sure how I got his number, but texted him and was like, hey, would you grab coffee? I'd love to just chat. And we met, and I, started sharing my heart with him about wanting to share the gospel with the lost, and just like this vision of what DMI was. And it was really cool. He was like, Aaron, honestly, I've been praying. We as a staff have been praying for the last like 6 to 12 months that an evangelistic movement would be launched out of Veritas. So he's like, this just feels like an answered prayer in a sense. And I was like, sweet, that's really cool and really exciting. And so he was like, he was like, write everything out, every single detail you can possibly think of, write it all out, and I will like take a look at things, take a look at the content, and talk to the eldership team about getting this started. And so
wow.
That was
timing, right?
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We've interviewed several ministries here, and that story is very common of someone who like shows up at Veritas with something on their heart to start here. And the super cool thing is that the leadership team, and the
Yeah.
pastors have been praying, like specifically for people to come here, whether it's evangelism or the youth ministry. It's been really cool to see these things grow at Veritas and to be able to like witness the prayer that has been a part of that well before it ever started.
Yeah.
So that's really encouraging.
Yeah, it is.
If you could just share a little bit about what the experience of DMI is like, how that went at Veritas, we'll get everyone's kind of take on it.
Yeah, I think so. The vision of DMI is that the church would be equipped, led by the Spirit, to go out and love the city of Columbus through prayer and gospel proclamation. So that's the heart of DMI, is to go and love the city of Columbus through prayer and gospel proclamation. The harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few, therefore pray earnestly that the Lord of the harvest would send out laborers into the field. That means that there are tons of people that are ready for the gospel, ready to surrender to Christ, and they just don't know where to look. They don't know where to go. And so what those 10 weeks looked like was on Wednesday nights, we would meet to be equipped. And then Sunday mornings before service, we would meet to pray for an hour and then go out for 2 hours after service to share the gospel in Columbus. So we would go to the Scioto Mile, we'd go to Milo Grogan, campus, downtown, Short North. The weekly sessions looked like we did how to share your testimony, how to like refine your testimony, questions to ask. We had a lot of guest speakers that came in that like specialized in things, how to share the gospel to Muslims, Mormons, Latter-day Saints, and
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So that was the equipping that you're
That's
talking
right.
about. The weekly meetings for the equipping was
Yeah.
like more tactical. Almost?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We also were going through that book, the
Mm-hmm.
Spiritual Multiplication in the Real World. And I feel like we gleaned a lot of insights from that in particular, just about kind of the nature of what does it look like to be somebody who makes disciples, but not only that, be somebody who makes disciple makers.
Mm-hmm.
Because like that's, I think, at the heart of DMI as well, is not only are we proclaiming the gospel and bringing it to people, but, you know, in the process of doing that, we are equipping the people who are bringing forth gospel proclamation. We're equipping them to be able to go and make people who will then go and make more disciples.
You've mentioned a couple times now, all of you have said like DMI is primarily like a street preaching, a street evangelism type of movement or type of organization, right? But then earlier, Aaron, you said like there's also a relational component to it. And so help me understand that, because in my head, I guess I see like typically you have with street evangelism, it's pretty much like a once in a lifetime encounter. You're proclaiming the gospel. You might pray with somebody. Maybe you give them like your phone number or something. But then what's the relational side? Like, is there follow-up? How do you actually make disciples instead of like just proclaim the gospel in that moment?
I think one of the cool things about this DMI experience was building relationships with other believers within the body that we may not normally see or interact with on a regular basis. I will say, granted, there were a fair amount of people in our community group that were taking part in this. So, but aside from those folks, able to meet like some folks and be able to just really share in that grind and share in that that struggle, but also share in the joys of that as well. I think really hit on the communal aspect of that, because I mean, we're spending all this time together and we're going out and we're sharing the gospel, and we're doing it in pairs or in small groups of 3. And so as we're walking and we're talking with each other, we're gaining each other's feedback on things, we're encouraging one another and praying along the way. And so I think that's just a beautiful thing to just continue to walk in faith, but like also do so alongside others who call upon the name of the Lord. So that's, I think, a part of the communal aspect.
But in terms of your original question, like how do you do the relational piece? I say both and, because there were people that we were able to talk to in our personal lives, or continue to like challenge them in some kind of way. But then also out on the streets, like, I mean, Aaron, like you have created a whole relationship with someone who like is walking with the Lord now and like has a good relationship with. So yeah, those are really exciting things to see.
So I definitely want to get into that. Like, I'd love to hear some of your like success stories, and I'd also love to hear some of the things that are like very challenging. But as I'm listening to you guys, which it's very evident that all of you have a passion for the gospel, right? Like that you want people to know what you know, that you want people to have the relationship with the Lord you guys have, which is amazing. But I'm trying to envision it. So help me out. Like you guys are going out by twos on the street, right? You're walking together, you're praying, but then you've gone through these weekly equipping sessions, right? But then you come across somebody. Take it from there. What do you do?
We depend solely on the Holy Spirit moving in people's lives. Like, so I feel like I just want to say that before we get into some of these like tactics, I guess that you could say that we use to effectively share the gospel with people. And so, yeah, okay, so we walk up to somebody, I'd walk up and I'd say, hey, how's it going? And good. Hey, so a couple ways we would say. One, we would just say, hey, we're out here having conversations with people about faith. Would you be interested in having a conversation?
Starts very broad, but then it narrows in towards like, hey, like we're being intentional about these questions that we're asking because we want to understand like where your heart is in the matter. And then we want to speak then to your heart, like with the good news.
And so you would say like, hey, we're out here. We go to a local church over here on 2nd. We're asking people to answer questions on the survey.
Right.
Yeah. And then we'd say, would you guys be open to answering some questions?
Did you have like a lot more no's than yeses, or what, was it pretty even? Or
I feel like there was like a fair amount of like rejection that we would get. You know, people just wanted to go about their business. Some
busy.
Just,
yeah. I get to my class or whatever.
Yeah. Some people just uncomfortable with the situation, but I'd be surprised at how many people actually were willing to engage with that.
I think we all were surprised. Like I would say 40 to 50% were willing and open to having conversations, which I was shocked by.
That's higher than I would have imagined.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we said, you want faith? Would you be open to having a faith conversation? They say yes. So tell me about your background. Like, did you grow up in a faith walk, or would you currently identify that you are a part of a faith? And so that would kind of usually be my next question. A lot of times it's, I grew up in the Catholic Church and I don't necessarily go anymore.
All kinds of people have like different maybe defense mechanisms, ultimately kind of shielding themselves or guarding themselves from engaging further. And so we call those smoke screens. They may ask a question and that question actually has like a different heart behind it.
Yeah.
So we just have to be very prayerful in how we consider those questions. We have to really rely on the Holy Spirit to give us discernment, to just understand like, okay, I hear this, like, if somebody's asking maybe a question about, if God is so good, like, why does he allow so much evil in the world? And it's like, okay, like there is an academic answer to this question and I could 100% give you this answer. However, is that what you need to hear in this moment? Mm-hmm. Or is there a deep-seated hurt behind this question?
Yes.
And so, the smoke screens, the ways that we were getting around smoke screens is just asking more questions, not being assuming and trying to give people the benefit of the doubt when doing so that it wouldn't feel like it was coming from a place of judgment and just like a place of genuine care. Because, there was not a single person that we came across that God didn't love and that God didn't make in his image. And so like we have to respect that, and we have to also just carry that same love that we have, like that God has for them. Like we also need that love for them. So yeah, we tried to ask good questions, dodge smoke screens, and really just start trying to, tear down walls, just one brick at a time, one unassuming question at a time.
Yeah. The two things that were very important that we were like looking for is what is their current understanding of the gospel, if at all? And then the second thing is the smoke screen. So if they do know the gospel, what are their hesitations to accepting Christ as Lord?
You have to do like a vibe check, honestly, because like there are some people, we talk about generating interest, and we have to gauge interest before we can even generate interest in the gospel. So, if the vibes are off and people are, completely turned off to the gospel, well, then that's like, maybe that's an opportunity for us to not present the gospel to somebody who doesn't want to hear it, but take an opportunity to ask them if we can pray for them, or if we can provide, in some ways, because we often ran into people who had very tangible needs. And so we partnered up with like the Imago Dei team, and we got, resources to certain folks who definitely needed them. But then there are other times where people are open to hearing the gospel. And so, like, I think there's like the, creation, fall, redemption, restoration model. There's there's a few different models, but that's probably one of the more common ones that like we even espouse for Veritas.
I'm still thinking about what you said a little bit earlier, James, about try to gauge interest, but also sense where their heart is at. That if they ask a question, that maybe you're sensing there's a lot of hurt behind that question, that the answer isn't to intellectualize towards them, that it's to be with them emotionally and share what you feel they might need to hear in that moment.
Well, and it doesn't hide the ball. Like that I think that's a key thing. I mean, in this culture that we have, especially in America, I would say probably, in Columbus, like people can sniff out authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
So if you are starting with a question of, are you open to have a conversation about faith? Yes, you're giving them agency, which is absolutely key. But it's also like, you want to talk about faith. You're not hiding the ball of like,
We were trying to trick them.
yeah.
Exactly.
And
We were very intentional about that. Like we were, and very prayerful about it. Like God soften these hearts.
Mhm.
So like there were people that said no, and we just took that as like that maybe their hearts are not ready right now.
Yeah.
And that, the harvest is still plentiful.
Mhm.
Well, and the hardness of heart can
Yeah.
come about from hurt so often. And I just think that
Hurt by the church too.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And that the softening, there needs to be like a right environment for that heart to start soften. So
God created us in his image to be in a perfect relationship with him, and sin broke that relationship. And Jesus came and paid the price of our sins to reconcile us back to the Father, be back in perfect relationship with him. That would be kind of how I would do it. And then the other thing that I think would be interesting to hear your guys' thoughts on is the 15-second testimony. What is your testimony in 15 seconds? Because there were a lot of times where we're meeting with people and they'd be like, I don't know if I like have enough time. Like they would kind of be right on the edge if they wanted to engage in conversation. And I'd just be like, hey, like I understand where you're at. I grew up chasing after partying and girls, and it wasn't until I came into relationship with Christ that I found that I had a God-shaped hole in my heart that only he could fill, and walking in life with him is the most fulfilled life I can live. And so so those are the two things that I would do: is share the gospel, make sure they know it, and then 15-second testimony.
I mean, again, the word like intentionality just keeps coming to mind. Like when I hear you guys talk about some of the strategy and some of the like experiences you had, I think that's all fascinating. When you would have kind of that explanation of like, well, we were made for a relationship with God, but sin broke, this relationship. Did you find yourself having to kind of explain some of the like terminology? Like, would you have to say, well, here's what sin is, or like, here's like, I just don't know how deep, obviously it depends on the vibe and like how willing people were willing to engage. But I was just curious if you like, in your experience, was it like they had follow-ups and you kind of had to relearn the gospel almost for yourself in order to proclaim it?
I feel like we definitely had to be very shored up in like the foundational understanding and beliefs. I feel like there might have been times where we like define terms, but also we live in America, so like a lot of people do understand some of these concepts, and while they may not agree, that's like an opportunity for us to then like press into, okay, well, how are you defining this? And
Right.
like, let's look at your definition. Now let's look at like
Right.
how the Bible has defined it, like
Yeah.
how it defines sin, how it defines salvation, like by means.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was never really like terms. At least I didn't get a ton of term like questions. It was a lot of times it'd be like, well, I don't think this is a sin. And that's like the smoke screen that James was kind of explaining earlier too, is like that is what is like, that's one of maybe multiple things that's blocking them from accepting the gospel. Finding those things is the way. So when you ask like, do we kind of share it in different ways to different people? Yes, depending on what their barrier is, right? So if someone is like, I don't think this is a sin, and so you can share the gospel in a way that explains why that is hurtful, or if someone has church hurt, that was something we experienced a lot, and so we could explain the gospel in a way of, hey, the church is made up of broken people who are trying to follow a perfect God, and they're gonna mess up, so stuff like that. More debates or rebuttals against the gospel rather than terminology.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I felt like a lot of those questions then open up to like some very like fundamental apologetics type questions.
Where James really lights up.
Oh, I love like that's like stuff that I would look at in my spare time. Like I eat it up. So like, but again, like I think going back to like the intentionality standpoints, like you can have all like the academic answers, but like not all the academic answers are good for what we're actually trying to accomplish there, because you're not just there's a person behind all of that, and there's experiences behind all of that, and so it's not just that we have like the right answers or that we carry the message of reconciliation, but we also carry the ministry of reconciliation. And so like when you're ministering to people, you have to take into account that person and what they need to hear or what they need to experience from you in a particular situation.
At the end of the day, what all this kind of brings me back to is it's Jesus who changes the heart of the lost, and Jesus the one who saves. Because I think a lot of times we would have to repent to the Lord before we go out and share the gospel, because we would start to maybe be prideful in a sense of like, we've been studying, and it's out of love, but it's like we've been studying so in confidence in the gospel. We've been studying so hard on God's word, and we have been like practicing our testimony and practicing sharing the gospel, that when we go out, we think that we have everything to convince someone of the gospel. And so, but when you have some of these people that have like church hurt, or they are wrestling with a sin, there's only so much you can convince somebody that's experienced pain in a specific way. And that is where, again, we have to come back to, we cannot say the right words to save somebody. It is Jesus alone who can save the lost, and the Spirit who convicts and soften hearts.
And also, like, there are times, because I mean, it's a commitment to do this, and it, like, I mean, Nikki and I experienced like a lot of spiritual warfare, and so there were times where we'd show up on Sunday and like our tanks were low, and it's just like, God, like I just confess it, I don't really want to be here right now, and I don't want to do this, but like you've called me to do this, and you're faithful, and you're with me, and because you're with me and you're going before me, you've given, each and every single one of us the Holy Spirit, who is our comforter and our guide and our helper. Like I know that it's not my strength that I'm operating on. Yes. And matter of fact, it's a call to boast that much more in our own weakness, because like the strength of God will prevail, and it's God that gets glory out of that.
That's right.
Over these 10 weeks that you shared the gospel or did the DMI ministry, what's one experience or one insight or one person you met that you would love to share about? Because I love that we've gotten like a practical foundation for how to share the gospel. I'd love to know how this touched each of you individually.
We met this guy at Goodell Park, and we just started talking to him, and he just moved here from Miami, Florida, and was a law student at Ohio State, and so just started, talking about, asked if he had a faith background. He did. He grew up in the church, but kind of was figuring things out. And so, we started sharing the gospel with him, and I asked him if he knew this girl that was in our community group, and he was like, no. And then 2 weeks later, school starts, they have a class together, sit next to each other, and she invites him to our community group, and he shows up the next week after I met him.
Won't he do it?
So that one was just like so crazy, and that's it's just so supernatural. Someone will plant seeds, one person waters, God gives the growth. And so it's just cool to see that it is like the perfect picture of DMI. Like there's nothing special about DMI. There's everything about how the Lord can use willing hearts to go share the gospel. That one is that's one of my favorites, and we're still hanging out with him, and he's been coming around to gatherings and here at Veritas, and then my other favorite one is Bryant Gingrich and I went out to share the gospel at 7 Mile, and we actually it was really funny. Some days you'll engage with like 50 people, and 20, 5 of them will want to talk. This day we talked to 3 people. All 3 of them we had 45-minute conversation with all 3 of them. And the third guy we talked to, he was journaling at 7 Mile, and we started talking to him. Didn't really have a really strong faith background, but was recently like searching, and so we started sharing the gospel with him. He's talking a lot about works-based salvation, I guess I should say. And so we started talking about Ephesians 2, where it's by grace you've been saved through faith. It's not of your own doing; it's the gift of God, not the results of works, that no one may boast. So I started sharing that verse with him, and you could really just, it's beautiful when you see the Spirit moving, and you just start to see people clicking, and you can just really start to tell people are following and connecting with the gospel. I think Brian got his phone number, and he started coming to our community group, and then it's actually fun. This is a cool one too, because the last week of DMI, we invited out, it was kind of just like the DMI team were like, hey, if you have a friend who's interested in joining us, like invite them out with us. And so we invited Wingley to come out with us, and he went out with, was it you and Kelsey?
Yeah. Stealing my story, man.
Oh, no. I'm heading over now.
Funny.
That's all I have.
Okay, I have 2 stories, but that was one of them.
We'll continue with that one.
Okay, so hopping in.
Yeah.
I went out. Wangley is one where he'll just like hang around, just in general. Like typically after service, DMI team will get together, like in that like prayer part of the sanctuary, and we'll pray just to like, bless the time right before. But he'll just like hang around and whatever, and I just looked at him and I was like, "Are you coming to like evangelize with us?" And like timidly, he was like, yeah. We meet this guy, and we have a long conversation with this guy, and just talking about faith, and like first it was like me and Kelsey talking, and then like Wangley joins in, and he's talking about the gospel, and we were just like in awe. Like this guy, like new to faith seemingly, and like he's like, no, yeah, this is the life. Yeah, it was just a very cool experience.
If you have a relationship with God, you have everything that you need to go out and then share, and you can speak on your experience and what you're learning, and people will receive that.
But my second story that I think it's really cool. I used to work at Stoff's in Grandview, and I was like transitioning out. I'm not working there anymore. I don't even think I was like saying like, do you know the gospel, like to any of my coworkers. It was just like, hey, like, so I'm doing this thing in my church. It was kind of like timid, or like kind of like fumbling over my words or whatever. At this point, like I'm supposed to be like clocking out and whatever, and I like just take the opportunity to talk to this girl, and I'm like, oh yeah, so I'm doing this evangelism thing to my church, and you just don't know, like the Lord is like, could be just doing something in someone's life. And she was like, oh, like what church do you go to? And I'm like, oh, like Veritas. And she's like, I've been kind of looking into getting into a church, but and I've like been reading my Bible every day when I get ready for work. And like after some talking, we had decided to just meet up, and like I had offered like, we can go through the Bible together, like Because at first it was like, well, we can go, you can like come to my church. And she just got scared. And I was like, you can go to my community group. And it's like, I get scared of that. And then like, we can just meet up. No big deal. So currently we meet weekly to go through the book of John. Yeah, since as well, like she has like given her life to the Lord, which is like a special little thing. And then just to like text in the group chat, like, guys, like she came to the Lord. Like everyone was so hype and it was great.
Yeah. And just to even circle back on something that you had originally stated that you wanted from the beginning, is just like, you were talking to God and saying like, yeah, I think I want to have like a one-on-one like discipleship kind of relationship, and for you to be obedient to God in stepping into this call, even though that's something that you didn't really want initially, and then for him to still give that to you out of this faithfulness and obedience, I think is a testament to one, just how good God is. Just the best. But then also just like what that example then says for, and has like ramifications, for us as like other believers who get to see that example and just know that like, if we're stepping out in faith too, like stepping out in obedience to what God has called us into, like the ways in which like we can expect God to move and expect God to bless us in that, and ultimately to receive glory in all of that.
Those are very powerful. And I know, I think I speak for Michael and I, and hopefully all our listeners, when I say like it's encouraging too. Like it's
so
like
encouraging.
like you said, I think a minute ago, Aaron, that when you're in the space where like you're being vulnerable and God shows up, like you don't want to leave that space.
Yeah.
And so like just hearing stories like that, even just secondhand or third hand or however many, it's encouraging to, hopefully encouraging to listeners to like to know that it is God moving, and it's not your guys' skill or the genius of DMI or whatever. It's you guys being faithful and him being faithful to who he is and what he said he'll do.
We always have to be ready to give a defense for the reason for the hope that we have. Like people need it, and God's glory is there, and the harvest, like Aaron has said, and like it's plentiful, but the laborers are few, and so like yeah, pray earnestly, and then go be part of that work, because you have a part to play in that work.
Well, guys, I'm sure we could talk about this for a lot longer, because you guys have a ton of stories, and obviously we get to have the privilege of hearing your passion and the way the Lord has just shown up for you guys and used you guys, and just speaking for myself, like I appreciate your guys' faithfulness to the calling he's had on your lives, because obviously he's using you, and this is, like you said, this is what we're all called to. So keep doing good work. But that will do it for us today on the Voices of Veritas podcast. Thanks for tuning in.